What is a surveillance state? A surveillance state is defined as a state which legally surveils all actions, locations, and friends of its citizens, in order to prevent a crime, or in order to solve them faster. That sounds like a good idea for now. Crimes are prevented and everyone is more secure. Nevertheless, the term has negative connotations. Why is that so? One of the most important tasks of a state is to provide security for its citizens. At the same time, the state has to allow them liberties so that everyone can live their life individually. Security and liberty complement each other, but also put each other in their place, because liberty always goes hand in hand with risks, and security always limits liberties. That's why in democracies a compromise has been established, which unites the best of both worlds. In a surveillance state, though, liberty is over-limited by security needs, and that's already its biggest problem. Recently, this topic was in the news regarding the so-called data retention, which aimed at saving all telephone and internet connection data for 6 months for the fight against terrorism. And although the retention and its benefits were heavily controversial and were forbidden by the Federal Constitutional Court, today this data retention seems almost harmless compared to PRISM and Tempora, the two surveillance programs of the British and American governments, which affect everyone in the world. That's because those surveillance programs not only save connection data, but also simply everything everyone does on the internet, which goes through British or US servers. Every text and every picture, literally everything, even that you're watching this video right now. This surveillance has already been ongoing in the United States for many years. For example, wiretapping of telephone calls, chats, or emails in order to fight terrorism and organized crime. For this, in specific cases, judges can order so-called eavesdropping operations. But what would happen if from now on we surveilled simply every telephone call, every chat, and every email without any suspicion? Couldn't we prevent crime and terrorism forever? Maybe for a short time, but it's more likely that advocates of this idea underestimate the inventiveness of criminals. Those who don't want to be brought to light will always find a way. For example, by strong encryption or personal conversations at locations where the surveillance state has no access. Now the only victims are completely normal, innocent citizens who from now on are being watched by the state in everything they do. Anyone who ever got a friend request from their mom, teacher, or employer on Facebook can maybe understand how it feels to be surveilled. And do I want to get caught by my employer online when I'm perhaps not saying nice things? Tumblr and 9gag are full of examples in which careless people harshly criticize their employer, then get fired by them in the comment area. Or stoner confessions replied to by their parents with, "Get your ass home, we gotta talk." A surveillance state which is always reading along principally is nothing else except that in a surveillance state, one doesn't have the choice to decline its friend request. What results from such surveillance is self-censorship. Everything one says or does, what could be controversial, people will keep to themselves in order to avoid possible problems, even though they will assume what they are doing is totally legal. So even critical discussions and statements will be limited out of fear. Advocates of surveillance argue that someone who has nothing to hide has nothing to fear, but unfortunately that idea contains a number of mistakes. It's about balance between state and citizens. That means that a citizen has something to fear if he has something to hide. Is that also true for secret services whose name shows that they have something to hide? Why should someone assume that the state secrets are always legitimate, while at the same time secrets of the citizens are in principle not? That surveillance could be inconvenient for a single person is also ignored, which brings us back to the has nothing to fear part. A completely innocent person has to indeed fear inconvenient surveillance. And what about governmental sanctions like custody? In Great Britain, people can be detained for up to 14 days without being charged. Should the suspicion turn out to be unfounded, there won't be any compensation for the imprisonment. Bad luck. The same holds true for Germany, where due to probable cause computer hardware and data of companies and private persons is confiscated, something that happens frequently. And even if the people concerned turned out to be innocent, they are left with the damage, because police can keep confiscated computers, hardware, and data for months and even years. That statement has nothing to hide assumes that the only one at fault is the citizen, not the state, and it is also possible that the laws toughen. What used to be unproblematic now suddenly raises suspicion. Or that a democratic system turns into a dictatorship, what may be currently happening in Hungary. The statement has nothing to hide assumes that the state is always right, even if mistaken or abusing its power. In the beginning of 2012, the Briton Levon Bryan tweeted about his upcoming journey to the US that he wanted to destroy America and dig up Marilyn Monroe. By destroy America, of course, he meant to party and get drunk. The US Immigration Department, which obviously scans Twitter for phrases like these, couldn't take a joke. searched his luggage for spades, and sent him and his female companion in handcuffs first to prison and then back to Britain. Even worse is what happened to Justin Carter, a teenager from Texas who was called fucked up in the head by a Facebook friend after a match in League of Legends. His sarcastic answer, "Oh yeah, I'm really messed up in the head. I'm going to shoot up a school full of kids and eat their still beating hearts. LOL JK." Not only got him put in jail for 6 months, but now he also has to fear a jail term of 10 years. What was meant to be a harmless joke is loved to be misunderstood by sarcasm-resistant authorities, who follow them with serious consequences. In that case, is there any room left for sarcasm? And what effect will it have on your liberty and self-censorship if you fear what was once private? Every word you write and say is being checked by authorities for possible lawsuits and therefore possibly misunderstood? Andre Holm, a scientific academic in Berlin's Humboldt University, got attention from the police after using the words gentrification and precarcination in an online article. The exact same words appeared in a confession after an assault on police cars in Berlin. For that reason, Holm and his family were heavily surveilled for months before he was arrested in his apartment, wearing nothing but underwear, and finally he was taken into custody for 3 weeks. Holm proved to be innocent, however the damage made was irreversible. He has to now deal with the state having deeply documented his intimate life for months, including that of his family, and that they have continued to do so for some time after his release. You don't even need to pursue the authorities' attention, if you have the wrong name, for example. 3 James Robinsons from the USA had to experience what it meant to be on a terror watch list. The first is a pilot, the second a lawyer, and the third a 5-year-old boy. And all 3 have been suspected to be terrorists and had to endure intense inspection or even not being allowed to fly. Although all 3 protested against such treatment, nothing changed. Only after they changed their name in the bookends like Jim for James were they allowed through. What is a terror watch list worth if it punishes the wrong people, and what conclusions can be made on the reliability of other forms of surveillance? A further problem is the abuse of data, and that does not only mean the sale of private addresses for advertising purposes, as is perfectly legal in the United States, but also the usage of private information discovered through spying, such as affairs, sexuality, or political convictions. Who knows about your private life has power over you, and nobody knows this better than the victims of the Communist East Germany's intelligence service or that of another German rogue state. The German police enlisted known and suspected gays in the 19th century to ease prosecution under a law forbidding gay sex. In 1933, those lists came into the hands of the Nazis, who first tightened the law and then took tens of thousands of men into psychiatric custody and castrated or killed them in death camps. Nobody thought this would happen as they started the so-called Rose List, so this became an important memorial against data collection. Concerning Nazis, what opportunities would the Jews have had to escape from Hitler's Reich with false documents if there had been biometric passports and network surveillance systems on every airport and border back then? Aren't we already preparing for the future prosecution of minorities with this? Politicians such as the former German Minister of the Interior Wolfgang Schäuble always rejected such comparisons with the message that a fall back into the Nazi system in today's Germany would be unthinkable. But how can he be sure that here in 20 or 30 years no other rogue state would be established like now in Hungary, or that Germany will not be taken over by some angry stranger? A state law must not only care about security, it has to take care that its methods will never be abused against its citizens. A surveillance state is also described by George Orwell in his novel 1984, a state forcing its citizens to act within the law by total surveillance, controlling language, suppressing sexuality, and staging war and terror to justify surveillance. The saying of surveillance critics 1984 was not supposed to be an instruction manual is meant seriously. Many of Orwell's fictions become reality. The programs Prism and Tempora are surveilling everything you do on the internet. Because of GPS and smartphones, your location can be queried at any time. Sexuality is being suppressed to prevent crimes which are often entirely unrelated. Cameras surveil public space and identify license plate numbers, faces, or even suspicious behavior automatically. War reports are manipulated and public opinion is controlled by it. Like, for example, the alleged weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The pursuit to protect people can turn out to be more damaging than any damage avoided. Permanent surveillance restricts our liberty, causes self-censorship and paranoia, and costs a lot of tax money without being shown to be useful. It's likely that surveillance will rise within the coming years. The reason why every private conversation in the world is not yet being surveilled is not due to respecting privacy, it is simply not possible yet. But technology will progress enough soon, and the question is, how will we deal with it? Do we want to live in a world in which security and liberty are equally valued, or in a surveillance state in which liberty itself is suspicious and has been suppressed in the pursuit of security? What do you think? Is surveillance good or bad for our society, or are we already on the way into the surveillance state? Drop me your opinion into the comments. If you liked the video, I'd be happy for a thumbs up, and I'd also be happy if you share it for more people to see what a surveillance state is. Here you can watch Draw My Life, or the newest cartoon about monsters. Have fun watching it, and see you next time.